What truly makes the moon have such various appearances while our consistent friend is referred to us as usual, introducing only one similar side toward us? Its secret opposite side has been accompanied by gutsy hypotheses and theories since days of yore. However, presently, excitingly, scientists might have made an unequivocal forward leap in addressing the tempting moon secret. In light of the fact that, as we now know, the South Pole Aitken Basin conceals an astounding secret underground. According to this, a giant structure sleeps on the invisible side of the satellite, which on the one hand gives a deep insight into the violent past of the heavenly body, and on the other, could make sense of why the two parts of the moon vary so emphatically from one another. What today takes only a couple of clicks of the mouse was a perplexing problem for huge numbers of years. While we are now in the comfortable position of being able to wonder about the farthest side of the moon from the comfort of our front room sofa, our predecessors had no chance of getting a brief look at the clouded side of our reliable friend. This is only because the moon has a bound rotation. Hence, it always turns the same side towards us. Exhaustively, however, the heavenly body was not always so modest about its side. In fact, after its formation, the satellite might have turned much faster before it was dialed down so much by the Earth's gravitational shaft over time that its rotational speed moved toward its orbital speed. Anyway, since observers from this far-off lunar time are in short supply, humankind had to wait until October 7, 1959, before the Soviet rocket Luna 3 revealed the baffling far side of the moon for the first time in history. 60 years later, Chang'e 4 was the first space probe to land on the clouded side of the moon. Even though, strictly speaking, it's not as dark as is often said, the side of the moon facing away from the Earth goes through the very same lunar phases as the side that shines towards us overhead every night, albeit in the opposite sequence. In fact, the far side of the moon has a higher reflectivity on average than the close side, which simply means that the hidden region shines brighter at the new moon than the visible side at full moon. This is due to the different compositions of the two parts of the moon, although the word parts isn't quite right in this context. Because of the moon's orbit being tilted at 5 degrees and its spherical shape, only 41% of the moon's surface is visible from Earth. But those 41% are enough to see that the front side of our satellite is decorated with dark spots that are as broad as they are endless. These are the so-called maria, marshes covered with hardened magma, and thus structures that are much rarer on the opposite side. At the same time, the furthest side of the moon has substantially fewer lunar mountains and rills. For years, scientists have been trying to make quick work of the reasons for these puzzling contrasts. But now, and this is the exciting part, scientists believe they have finally solved the secret of the different lunar halves of the globe. The reason for it lies dormant in a hidden giant structure far beneath the lunar surface. The gigantic design on the far side of the moon is, for a large number, Hawaii is the ultimate travel destination. No wonder, since the anonymous main island, which covers over 10,400 square kilometers, not only boasts interesting black sand beaches but also one of the largest active volcanoes on Earth, Mauna Loa. But what does a paradisiacal getaway island in the Pacific really have to do with an unprecedented discovery on the far side of the moon? Well, the answer is astonishing, and Peter Bean James of Baylor College in Texas summarizes it as follows. Imagine a pile of metal multiple times bigger than the main island of Hawaii and cover it underground. That is roughly the startling mass we found. The keyword pile of metal could make some people think of a monstrous spaceship that once crashed into the surface of the moon, but it's not exactly like that. To grasp what the startling mass is really about, we first need to imagine its location. It isn't just any area. It's the South Pole Aitken Basin, and therefore the largest preserved impact crater in the entire solar system. There is no doubt that this, with an incredible diameter of more than 2,000 kilometers, still testifies to a violent cosmic collision. What is much more problematic, however, is how exactly the ruthless impact happened an estimated 4.3 billion years ago, and what effects it had on the further development of the then still young moon. To draw nearer to solving this thrilling secret, and to investigate the idea of the subsurface at the south pole of the moon, in the same breath, Peter James' group analyzed data from the Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory (GRAIL) mission in September 2011. Two space probes had set out for the moon to study its gravitational field and anomalies, and to provide important new insights into the internal structure of our satellite. The bottom line is that the specialists combined the Grail data with those of the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has been in operation since 2009, to map the entire lunar surface in high resolution. As mentioned, James' research team was finally able to identify a massive mass anomaly far beneath the South Pole Aitken Basin. And to make sure we're all on the same page, we're talking about a structure that reaches a depth of 200 kilometers and weighs an incredible 2.8 times 10 to the power of 18 quadrillion tons. For comparison, the mass of the entire Earth's atmosphere is estimated at around 5.15 quadrillion tons. But what on earth is hidden in the imperceptible universe of the moon's surface? Well, that probably depends on who you ask. While the more alternative minds think it's possible that we are really dealing with a secret base of an unknown lunar civilization, the more moderate scientists adopt a more conventional approach. Explicitly, this alludes to the metallic center of the space rock that made the monster impact bowl in the far-off past. This is in no way, shape, or form an obscure approach, but rather the consequence of a virtual experience that showed that such an iron-nickel center could enter deep into the moon's upper mantle during an impact, without necessarily sinking into the center of the celestial body. In this context, the sheer weight of the space rock center could also pull the lower part of the pit nearly a kilometer deeper into the ground. So, it is conceivable, but it should be noted that scientists are also examining a second hypothesis in this respect. This depends less on a space rock center and more on a gigantic clustered amassing of thick oxides that, once packaged at the moon's south pole as the original magma sea cooled and cemented. Have we solved the mystery of the moon's sides of the equator? Future exploration should show which hypothesis is eventually correct. Anyway, if we are dealing with the artifact of an impact, it could also help us figure out the confusing contrasts between the sides of the moon, in addition to the unevenly distributed Maria. We now also know that the crust on the near side of the moon is considerably thinner than that on the far side. At the same time, however, we also find a crust on the Earth-facing region that is enriched with unusually high proportions of radioactive thorium, potassium, phosphorus, and rare earth elements. Yet how this so-called creep landscape came about is just as unclear as the question of what set the lunar volcanism in motion. Nonetheless, some specialists estimate that the differences in the moon's crust can be traced back to the flowing forces of the Earth, but others see a devastating impact as the most promising explanation. One of them is Matt Jones from Brown University, who, together with his associates, studied the effect of the immense intensity of the impact at the moon's south pole on the whole celestial body. Strangely, the South Pole Aitken Basin is precisely opposite the area known as the Killjoy region, so perhaps we are dealing here with a coincidence that isn't exactly a coincidence at all. The subsequent reproduction of the impact was based on geophysical models of the early lunar interior, and it eventually uncovered something surprising. Yes, the impact could indeed have triggered a thermal anomaly in the lunar mantle, which significantly affected the development of the moon's interior over countless years. The crash with the space rock, which was around 100 kilometers in size, led to a tremendous intensity flood that spread through the moon's interior to the opposite side. In doing so, it also impacted the area now known for its various Maria, as well as the Killjoy landscape. This interaction ensured that titanium-rich magma gatherings were transported to the side facing the Earth, much like how a surfer is carried along by a wave. According to the simulation, the intensity created and the resulting mantle convection were sufficient to explain both the unusual jerk development and the basalt-rich stone of the Maria. Moreover, the impact at the moon's south pole might have even triggered the volcanism and, consequently, the formation of the Maria. However, the event likely thawed heat-generating elements on the near side of the moon. This association of radioactive warming and increased mantle convection might have literally fueled the upper mantle of the near side over millions of years. Subsequently, the hot magma was able to enter the surface in gigantic eruptions. According to scientists, the first eruptions happened around 200 million years after the space rock impact. However, the most intense period of the Maria volcanism didn't occur until 300 to 500 million years later. The bottom line is that the South Pole Aitken Basin and the nature of the Moon's front side are clearly directly connected, and one of the greatest lunar mysteries of all time may finally be a thing of the past. We hope that soon, tapping on that subscribed button will also finally be a relic of days gone by. Become part of our community now and never miss another video from us in the future. We'll see you soon.